Thank you for joining us on the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. And here's your host, Kruse of LEADx.
This is it, and once again, it's time for the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. I got to tell you, I am very excited today to bring you a guest that I think is going to give us the tips, the secrets, and what we need to know about ensuring that we have a great workforce. You know, one of the things that I ask people all the time is, what's the true measure of leadership success? You know, it's got to be the fact that I can do a line item budget, right? I can book a conference room like nobody's business, and I can meet that deadline when it's supposed to be met. You know, how about resource management? Maybe it's my ability to manage the resources. Well, I got to tell you, really, it's none of those traits. And the true measure of a successful leader is how satisfied is the workforce, how engaged is that workforce, and then how productive they are to make sure that the clients and customers give the very best experience that we can. But what if I told you that according to the Gallop organization, close to 70% of our workforce is either disengaged or actively disengaged? So how realistic can it be to have an engaged workforce when we have such staggering numbers? Well, these are some of the questions I'm going to ask our next guest. And with a dream, he wanted to become the next Bill Gates. Our guest started his first company when he was 22 years old. Despite his hard work, the company failed just after 1 year. But after discovering the power of leadership and extreme productivity, he went on to start, build, and sell several multi-million-dollar tech companies that won both Inc. and 500 awards for fast growth and best places to work awards. I got to tell you, he's a best-selling author of 6 books, including 15 Secrets Successful People Know About Time Management and my all-time favorite, Employee Engagement 2.0. He's also the host of his own podcast, LEADx. Please join me in welcoming Kevin Kruse. Kevin, I'm very honored that you joined us on the show.
Chris, it's my pleasure. I'm excited to be here, and thanks for beating the drum like I do on employee engagement and leadership.
You know, and I don't think people really understand, Kevin, truly what it means to have an engaged workforce. And I think before I ask you why employee engagement is so important, maybe just give us a brief definition of what employee engagement is.
Yeah, Chris, I'm glad you started there, because I think part of the struggle with getting people to care about engagement is due to the fact that there's a lot of different definitions and a lot of confusion. And unfortunately, a lot of people just think they hear employee engagement and they think, oh, it's just about employee satisfaction. But a satisfied employee really isn't enough. You know, that's not the person that's going to come up to you with a great idea or, give 100% at all times. Other people think engagement means employee happiness. We're just trying to create an environment with balloons and bring your dog to work and free beer and all that. And I'm not against balloons and dogs and beer, but you can be happy at work and not really working on behalf of the organization. So I always like to start and make sure everyone knows that when I'm talking about employee engagement, I'm talking about the emotional commitment that we have to our organization and its goals. When we're emotionally committed, basically it means we care about our organization, we care about its goals. That's when we're going to give discretionary effort. Employee engagement isn't the same as discretionary effort, but it's what leads to discretionary effort. And that's the magic. We all would love to have, a team filled with people who are just giving us everything that we're asking, but then also more. So that's, to me, what it's all about.
I think that one of the things that you touch on there is very important. You hear the buzzword all the time, buy-in. We got to get buy-in. Our organization needs to have buy-in. And I don't think that that's the word they should be using. It should be engagement. If you want buy-in from the workforce, you really have to make them feel that they have a sense of ownership when it comes to being within that organization. And then once they feel that ownership, they're going to make it kind of their own, and then they're going to want to see the success for themselves.
Yeah, I love that concept about ownership, because it's a fundamental thing. I mean, if we feel that we own something, if we had a hand in building something, well, then we're going to protect it. We're going to defend it. We're going to fight for it. We're going to work. We don't wash a rental car. We wash the car we own. So that really is a key to getting people to give us what we want from a worker perspective. Let them, have a sense of ownership. Let them be owners in the business, if at all possible.
Kevin, one of the things that I wanted to ask you before we kind of get into the, how to develop an organization and have good employee engagement, if you don't have good employee engagement within your organization, what are some of the things that we can expect to be going wrong on a daily basis?
Well, sure. So, I mean, there's great research that shows, a correlation between engagement or lack of engagement and all kinds of business measures. I mean, pretty much, any of them. So, if you want to look at quality, an engaged worker is going to make fewer mistakes. A disengaged worker is going to have more accidents. An engaged salesperson is going to sell just as hard on a Friday afternoon as she would on a Monday afternoon. A disengaged salesperson is going to, just take the first no and walk away, wait for the base pay to show up. So no matter what you're looking at, whether it's sales, whether it's service, productivity, and certainly loyalty, disengaged workers, well, the ones who are actively disengaged, they're the ones that are already looking for a job. They're the ones that are going to hop out at the first chance they get. The disengaged, sort of that middle group, even if they're not, they might not hate the company, they might not hate the job, but they're taking those headhunting calls. I mean, they're always looking for that next opportunity to get, 5 or 10% raise in pay, because again, they don't really care about the organization. They're caring more about their own financial success. So no matter what business ROI measure there is, you're going to see lower levels, with the disengaged employees and higher levels with the engaged ones.
Yeah, I think that one of the things you said, especially with those disengaged employees, is it's not even necessarily that they're on the phone looking for those new opportunities, but they're really submarining the success as well that's happening within that organization. So they're kind of giving you a double whammy. They're looking to exit, but anytime something comes up to where they could be an asset for, they're really actively trying to submarine that work.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
One of the things that you said about taking even those disengaged folks, taking those calls and, maybe looking for an increase in pay, employee engagement, it's got to be just as easy as just throwing more money at these employees and just making them happier, isn't it?
Yeah, we wish it was that easy.
I know,
right? Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's when it comes to pay, people need to have a sense that they're being paid fairly. I mean, there's few of us who would knowingly work and be dramatically underpaid for the value that we're providing. But all else being equal, people would rather work for a purpose than a paycheck. It's about mission, not money. And so, that's if it was just about those benefits plans, those salaries, it would be an easy solution. And again, we wouldn't have 2/3 of our workforce not engaged in the United States and Canada. It's worse worldwide. So money's not an answer. We wish it was, but it really there isn't a strong linkage there.
I'm glad you say that, because a lot of people say that it could be fixed with money, and it really can. So let's go ahead and get into the crux of this then. First off, if we're leaders and we want to make the determination, maybe we think we're in this cornucopia world, and maybe we think we have a satisfied and engaged workforce. What are the things that we can look at that says, you know what, we may not have the best engaged workforce in our organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think, at a gut level, a lot of times you can see it, and whether that's a manager, a team, a department that's got high turnover, as an example, that's missing deadlines, that's, a pocket of your customer service team that has lower customer satisfaction scores or NPS scores than others. I mean, you can see it in the data, and you can see it in sort of the qualitative day to day. Ideally, I'm a quantitative guy, though. I don't want to have one manager tell me that she's sure she's got, highly engaged team members, and another manager tell me she's got a disengaged one, or that they accuse each other. I like to go to the numbers. And I think, any mid-sized to large company should be working with an outside firm, to do these employee engagement surveys. And, there's the big companies that do them, the big consulting companies we've probably all heard of. But there's also smaller professional service firms out there that people can work with. Even the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, offers an engagement tool. I think there's a bundled one now with SurveyMonkey. So there are ways, even as a small to mid-sized company, that you can start to implement surveys. And in a worst case scenario, I mean, in my small businesses in the past, I have implemented my own, but the one downside to that is you really do take away that confidentiality element. If you really want to get accurate scores, accurate comments, you need to tell your team members that, this is going to remain anonymous. We're not trying to call anyone out, get anybody in trouble. We need your honest comments and your honest ratings. And so I think that in organizations where you don't have a lot of trust already built up, when maybe the team is not used to this kind of a survey instrument, if you do it yourself, if your own HR department or HR person implements it, they might feel like you're gonna know who answered what question. So in those cases, again, it's always best to try to use an outside partner just to kind of give a little bit more credibility around the confidentiality aspect.
One of the things that I always found interesting when it came to employee engagement is that we burden our leaders. I mean, think about frontline supervisors and managers. Here are the folks that they have to do the budgets and they have to do the resource management and they have to order supplies and they've got to get to that meeting. Whereas their responsibility should be getting the very best out of that workforce. So when we think about creating an organization that has poor employee engagement, we're not allowing our frontline leaders to engage with the people that they need to ensure that they're engaged into the organization. How do we get around that?
Yeah, Chris, again, I say jokingly, great minds think alike, because you're right. If I could do one thing as a leadership dictator, I would say every person that's working out there who has the word manager in their title, whatever sales manager, service manager, whatever, business manager, I wish the word manager would be replaced with the word coach, because the word manager, you're right, it's too easy to respond to all those things that are urgent but not necessarily important for the long term. So we push papers and we answer emails and we review documents and we create budgets and spreadsheets. I'm not talking, we become managers of tasks. We're great task managers, but we're not leading our people. And I feel that if we just realize that the number one job of managers, it's to coach their team members, for long-term success. And certainly they need to be responsible for the output of that team. But I think if we really thought about managers as being coaches first, a lot of this would just change. But I think, other than the military, most organizations do a horrible job of training their frontline managers. It's really a shame. Even large organizations, Chris, I would love to hear your insights and experience with this. Even in the large organizations, I'll see that director to VP level, well, they're going on retreats and they're in executive MBA programs and they're bringing in expensive speakers for their quarterly meetings. But if you're a first-time manager in a large organization, often you get no training, or you get that 1 or 2 day training that's like, how do you hire people without asking the inappropriate questions? How do you fire someone without getting sued? It's not about like how to engage, how to coach. So, have you seen the same thing?
Yeah, I got to tell you, that's exactly what it is. And, in my past life, I lived in the ambulance world, the emergency medical services. And sometimes if you became a supervisor of the day because you've been there the longest and you get the clipboard and the keys and now you're making those decisions. But the challenges now come into not only that you have to try to make decisions for a system, make decisions for a workforce, but there's nobody guiding you into how to do that. Now, as we start to transition into this new generation of workforce, it becomes even more difficult because the people like me who were came up through the 80s with the folks from World War II as their bosses, I've got to change my leadership style to teach the supervisors of today to deal with the workforce of today. So we're only compounding this problem now by not having a good, strong leadership development program that addresses the workforce of today and not necessarily the mission of today.
Yeah, and you bring that up. The times they are changing. It's not only the generational differences, which I think there are some. I also think a lot of people will use that as a cop out. Like, well, I'm a great leader. It's just those millennials are all effed up or whatever, right? It's an excuse sometimes. But there certainly are differences, and things are changing. So, all the changes we think about with technology and having, a supercomputer in our pocket. Well, more and more people are working remotely. It's becoming less of even a conversation, about should you work from home? Can you work from home? Remote workers, et cetera. And all of a sudden, everybody just is working remotely, at least part-time, and nobody's really getting training in how do you lead, how do you communicate, how do you support remote workers best, just as one example. And this is going to continue. People think I'm a nut about this, Chris, but like the robots are coming for our jobs. And I don't literally mean like human looking robots, or whether it's the self-driving cars or the kiosks and all the quick service restaurants, or whether it's the smart computers that are interpreting x-rays better than a radiologist. I mean, there's rapid change coming in the decades ahead. How are we going to lead a human workforce in this environment? I mean, I just think it's going to be crazy.
And I got to tell you, I mean, you talked about the millennials, and I was one of these people, Kevin, and I've probably got to send a shout out to all those millennials to say I'm sorry, but I was the one who was thinking that they were lazy, they're not motivated, they're not smart enough. But this generation is really going to revolutionize how work is being done. Now they're being nicknamed the gig generation because they're not going to want to work 9 to 5. They don't want to come into an organization and spend 8 hours. They're going to come in and say, what do you got for me to do? I'll come back and see you next week when you have something else. So now when we start to think about what employee engagement, what leadership looks like in the future, they're really defining and changing the paradigm of what that's going to look like. But let me go and ask you this while I have you. And, now that we kind of identified, we know that the importance of employee engagement, how can we invest in our business and invest in our workforce that we can have better engaged employees?
Yeah, well, I think when it comes to driving engagement up, and it is possible. It's not, despite the horrible data on it, there are great case studies. I often talk about what Doug Conant did at Campbell Soup over 10 years, from like the worst scores in the Fortune 500 to the best scores. So you really can change levels of engagement and your survey results, over time, no matter what industry you're in, how long you've been around. And I think you need to look at it at two levels. I mean, from a macro level, the problem most organizations is either they don't care and they don't survey, or they do an employee engagement survey every year or two, and the data stays up in the ivory tower in the C-suites, and they look at it and they all talk and say, "Oh, I see we dropped a little bit on communication. How are we going to fix that?" And someone says, "I know, CEO, you just need to double the number of newsletters you send out to the employees." So they say, yes, that's going to improve, communication. And then they're shocked when employee engagement doesn't move a year or two later. So organizationally, to fix it, we have to realize that over 70% of how we feel about work is the variance in that has to do with who our boss is. It's actually the manager. Our manager is the filter. So, and you can see this in large distributed organizations, same CEO, same mission, vision, values, same benefits, et cetera. And you'll have really high engagement and really low engagement. What's the difference? It's the leader of the individual teams. And so when you understand, again, Chris, just as you've explained, it's really about frontline leadership. You need to do those surveys and give each team leader her own data. Here's your score. Here's, where you're higher than average in our organization. Here's where you're lower than average. And each team leader needs to take a grassroots approach. Let me gather my team over a pizza. Let's talk about what we're doing well. Let's look at our areas for improvement, and let's brainstorm at the frontline level, at the grassroots level. What can we do to improve communication, or whatever it might be? Now, having said that, I do think that the answers, the solutions need to come from the ground up. There's some universal truths, and my own experience as an entrepreneur, but backed by that 10 million worker survey from years ago, most of us want three things: growth, recognition, and trust. And we want to be growing and advancing and being challenged in our work. We want to feel appreciated by our boss and peers. And trust at a basic level is certainly, I want to make sure, Chris ain't lying to me or stealing from my paycheck, but that's a low bar. It's really about, I trust the future is bright. I trust that the company has a bright future. I trust that I have a bright future. I trust that leadership has a good plan moving forward. And so, as a frontline leader, whether you're managing one person or 10 people or, God forbid, 20 people or more, you need to be thinking about, how can I create that culture? What did I do this week to help people to learn and to grow or to advance in their career? Have I noticed things going right? Have I said thank you for people who are, giving extra effort? When's the last time I talked about the strategic plan of the company, how our work, aligns to it? So again, Chris, like big picture, it's like, yeah, survey, but you got to get that data down to the bottom level and brainstorm around it. But frontline leaders need to always be thinking about growth, recognition, and trust. I think that's a good starting point. We certainly can go deeper than that, but I think that's a good starting point.
And I have to agree. And I think that one of the things, Kevin, that organizations don't utilize the best is their written vision statement as well. I mean, it's there for a reason. And, I read a good book one time that said, where there is no vision, the people will perish. And we are wired to think in pictures. And without a vision of where we're going to go, we don't know where we're going. And that it really is going to disengage the workforce as well. So if we can start off with a good, solid vision within our organization to say, the last organization I had, we wanted to deliver the highest quality of patient care, be leaders in our communities and role models for our career field. Everything we did, we stepped towards that vision. And your responsibility into this vision is this. And your responsibility is this. So this gave them at least a framework, at least a blueprint to say, do you know how we become successful as a team? This is how we do it. And if there's one piece of advice that I can give to the people who are out there, because I ask this question all the time, Kevin, I don't know if you do. When I'm speaking in front of leaders, I'll say, how many people have vision statements? Raise your hand. And you get so many proud hands that come up. And then the next question is, who can come up here and recite it for me? If you can't recite it and you don't know what the vision of the organization is, how does your workforce know what the vision is? And how does your workforce know how their responsibilities fit into that vision? And I think that we've got to dust that vision statement off. If you don't know it, throw it out. Get your leaders, get your workforce to the table, develop a new one, and build a campaign around it and engage your workforce around that vision. Maybe I'm shooting high, but I've seen it work.
Chris, first of all, I'm going to steal that that question and bit that you just shared with me, because I think that's fantastic to do. And I've done something similar when I've been called into an in-house group where, CEO has their top 50 or 100 people. And I mentioned trust and vision and he or she always says, that's in our annual report. They know it. Or we've got that on our wall. They know it. And so then I'll hand out blank index cards and I will ask everyone to write the company vision on the index card and pass it forward. And usually over half don't even try to pass it forward. They know they've got nothing. And then it's like almost hilarious as I get them and I start reading some crazy, it's like that game of telephone. It's like, how did this statement come from the actual vision?
That's right.
And it's not, as you said, too many leaders think you announce what the vision is, or you say it once, or you put it on one wall and you're done. And Chris, what I love the verbs you use, step towards the vision. It's not like you're there or it's a piece of information on the intranet. It's something you bring up over and over again so you can talk about how every day this is how we are stepping closer to that vision. That's great.
Yeah, and I love it. But I got to tell you, Kevin, I've had a really great time chatting with you. I do want to be respectful of your time. I'm sure there's a lot of folks out there that are fans and they may want to engage with you or they may want to kind of pick your brain. Is there a way that they can get in touch with you and kind of engaged on the topic of employee engagement?
Yeah, absolutely, Chrissy. And thanks for the opportunity. I do respond to every email or other ways I'm on social media, but the easiest, my email is just kevin@leadx.org, LEADX.org, O-R-G. And as you mentioned, Chris, it's the LEADx Leadership Show on iTunes if anyone wants to get an extra dose of leadership.
And I am a fan and I enjoy it. And I want to tell you, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to visit with us. It's been my honor to have you here, Kevin.
Thanks, Chris.
And for everybody out there, just going to put the wraps on another Ultimate Leadership podcast. I want you to keep those emails coming. I want you to go ahead and send those suggestions. We got some great shows that are in the works. And until next time, this is Chris Saballero, and I look forward to chatting with you again real soon.
Thank you for joining us. The Ultimate Leadership Podcast is a production of ChrisSaballero.com. You can interact with us by email at ultimateleadership16@gmail.com. All rights reserved.